Thank you for joining us today to share your incredible near-death experience. Can you start by telling us a bit about yourself and what led up to this life-changing event? Of course. My name is Rosalie, and my story begins back in 2006. I had just finalized a difficult divorce from my ex-husband. We had been married for over a decade and had two beautiful children together, fraternal twins, a boy and a girl, born in October 1996. I don't want to go into all the painful details, but my ex-husband was abusive, both to me and tragically to our children as well. When I discovered the extent of his abuse, I immediately left him and pressed charges. The divorce went through quickly given the circumstances. I thought that once he was out of our lives, things would get better. I was working hard to rebuild our lives and help my children heal through therapy. But I had no idea of the horror that was still to come. I'm so sorry you and your children went through such a traumatic experience. What happened next? It was August 26, 2006. We had just come home from a therapy session for the kids. As soon as we walked in the door of our house, I saw a flash and felt this burning sensation in my chest. I fell to my knees and then collapsed face first onto the floor. My ex-husband had broken in and was waiting for us. He shot me 6 times in the chest and torso. Somehow, he managed to miss any vital organs, but I was bleeding heavily. Then he turned the gun on our children. I was barely conscious, but I heard the gunshots. He killed our daughter first, then our son. The last thing I heard before everything went dark was him muttering, "Now we'll all die together," and then another shot as he took his own life. That's absolutely devastating. I can't even imagine going through something so horrific. What do you remember happening next? It's hard to describe, but I felt the sensation of standing up and looking around the room. I could see my body on the floor, and my poor children. But the strange thing was, I felt oddly detached. I knew I should be feeling grief or horror, but at that moment I just felt nothing. Then I started to feel this tugging sensation around my midsection, almost like a kitten playing with a shoelace. When I looked down, I saw what appeared to be a glowing string or cord attached to my belly button area. The tugging got stronger and stronger. Suddenly I was moving, being pulled along by this cord. Everything around me went pitch black, darker than anything I've ever experienced. But in the distance, I could see a pinprick of light that was gradually getting larger. I don't know how long I traveled through that darkness. It felt like it could have been days or even weeks. As I moved, I caught glimpses of scenes playing out in the blackness around me, historical events, tragedies, moments of both great evil and profound good. It was like watching snippets of the entirety of human history flash by. That's fascinating. What happened when you reached the light? When I finally passed through into the light, it was the most incredible feeling. I was enveloped in the purest love and joy I've ever felt. It was like being a small child again, safe in my father's arms. As I took in my surroundings, I saw a man standing nearby. He had dark skin and a beard, and was wearing a simple robe and sandals. Somehow I just knew immediately that it was Jesus Christ. He was surrounded by other souls, and you could feel the love radiating from him. At first I felt unworthy to approach him, so I started to turn away. But then I heard his voice in my mind, saying, "My daughter, where are you going?" When I replied that I wasn't worthy to be in his presence, he told me that everyone who believes in him is worthy. He invited me to walk with him, and as we did, he began to explain why I was there and what my purpose was. Wow, meeting Jesus himself must have been incredible. What did he reveal to you about your purpose? Well, the first thing I realized was that I truly was dead. My earthly life had ended. So of course, my first thoughts were of my children. I asked Jesus why he had given them to me only to take them away so tragically. His answer surprised me. He said that was what they had wanted, that they had chosen that ending for themselves. When I expressed confusion, he went on to explain that every soul enters into a contract with God before coming to earth. We choose the experiences and lessons we want to learn in each lifetime. I struggled to understand how anyone would choose such a horrible fate. Jesus told me that earth isn't our final destination, our ultimate goal is to rejoin with God after we've learned and grown through our earthly experiences. Even those who commit evil acts will eventually have their souls cleansed and rejoin with God. It was a lot to take in. Part of me was angry that God would allow such evil and suffering to exist. But Jesus helped me see the bigger picture, that we all start with a blank slate and the free will to make our own choices. The lake of fire, described in Scripture, is more of a metaphor for the cleansing process evil souls go through. That's a profound perspective on good and evil, and why suffering exists. Did Jesus tell you anything about your own life purpose? Yes, he did. He told me that it wasn't my time to rejoin God yet, that I needed to return to my earthly life because I still had an important purpose to fulfill. Honestly, I didn't want to go back. I had lost everything that mattered to me. My children were gone, taken by the man who was supposed to love and protect them. It felt like I was the one being punished by having to return to that pain. But Jesus assured me that, just like my children, I had also entered into a soul contract before coming to earth. My life experience isn't finished yet. He told me I needed to go back and share with others what I had learned about the afterlife and what was to come in the future. He showed you the future? What exactly did you see? Yes, it was incredible. Jesus touched my forehead with 2 fingers, and suddenly I could see visions of how the world would unfold over the next 77 years. It was like watching a movie of future events play out before my eyes. Some of the things I saw were very personal, like meeting my second husband in 2013 and having another child with him. I even saw my second husband's death in 2051. But I also saw major world events and changes coming in the decades ahead. For example, in 2024 I saw the global banking system on the verge of collapse. They did away with all paper currency and forced everyone to switch to cryptocurrencies that could be easily tracked and controlled. The US implemented a social credit scoring system similar to what China has now. But then in 2028, Donald Trump was re-elected as president and dismantled that system, bringing back paper money for US citizens. There was a period of relative stability and peace in the world after that. However, in 2061 I saw the United States split into 2 separate countries, the United Northern States and the United Southern States. Just 2 years later, China invaded both countries, forcing them to join with Canada and Mexico to survive. That led to a 7-year world war. The vision stopped around 2077. I'm not sure why I wasn't shown further into the future than that. Perhaps because that's around when my own life will end and my soul contract will be fulfilled. Those are some very specific and dramatic predictions. How did you feel after being shown all of that? It was overwhelming, to say the least. On one hand, I felt a sense of purpose knowing that I was meant to share this information with others. But it's also a huge burden to carry such knowledge. Knowing the exact year my future husband will die, for instance, that's not an easy thing to live with. I haven't told him that part. I worry about how that knowledge might affect him or our relationship. And seeing such monumental changes coming for the world, major wars, the splitting of my country, global financial systems collapsing, it's scary. I often wonder if there's anything that can be done to change that future, or if it's all predetermined. I can only imagine how heavy that must feel. What happened after Jesus showed you those visions of the future? After he took his fingers away from my forehead, I immediately felt that tugging sensation again. I was being pulled backwards, away from Jesus and that place of incredible love and peace. I traveled back through that dark tunnel, much faster this time. When I emerged, I found myself hovering over my own body. I could see my neighbor performing CPR on me, screaming into a phone for an ambulance to hurry. As soon as the paramedics arrived and began working on me, I felt myself being drawn back into my body. I re-entered through the top of my head. Let me tell you, after experiencing the freedom of existing without a physical form, suddenly being confined in a body again felt so constrictive and uncomfortable. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in the hospital. The doctors told me I had flatlined multiple times in the ambulance and again on the operating table. They called my survival a medical miracle. That must have been quite a shock to your system. How did you begin to process everything you had experienced? It was extremely difficult at first. I was dealing with the physical trauma of being shot 6 times, the emotional devastation of losing my children, and then trying to integrate this profound spiritual experience on top of all that. Part of me wondered if I had imagined it all, if it was just some kind of hallucination brought on by blood loss and trauma. But it felt so real, more real than anything I've ever experienced. And I had knowledge of things that I couldn't possibly have known otherwise. I struggled with whether or not to tell anyone what I had seen. I was worried people would think I was crazy. When I was about to be discharged from the hospital, I finally worked up the courage to tell my doctor about my experience. I shared some of what I had seen, including a premonition that he would be going home soon. Unfortunately, his reaction was to immediately order a psychiatric evaluation. I ended up being involuntarily committed to a mental health unit for what they called a mental break. Tragically, that same doctor passed away unexpectedly just a few months later in 2006. While I felt validated in a way, I mostly just felt sad that he hadn't been able to find peace with the knowledge of his upcoming death. That must have been so frustrating to not be believed and to be treated like you were mentally ill. Did that experience make you hesitant to share your story with others? Absolutely. For a long time, I didn't tell anyone else about what I had seen. I was afraid of being labeled as crazy or unstable. I had already lost so much, I couldn't bear the thought of losing my freedom or autonomy as well. But over time, I felt more and more compelled to share my experience. I believe I was shown these things for a reason. Jesus told me I needed to come back to tell others what is to come. I feel a responsibility to share that knowledge, even if not everyone believes me. That's why I finally decided to reach out and tell my story. I know there will be skeptics. But I hope that by sharing the things I've seen about the future, it might help prepare people for what's coming or maybe even change some of those outcomes. I can understand that sense of responsibility. Have you experienced any other psychic or supernatural abilities since your NDE? Yes, I have. It's not something I talk about often because I know how it sounds to most people. But ever since my near-death experience, I've had what you might call psychic abilities. I often know things about people that there's no logical way I could know. I can sense details about their past or see glimpses of their future. Sometimes I get strong intuitions about upcoming events. I want to be clear, I don't believe these abilities come from any dark or demonic source. They were given to me by Jesus during my NDE. I see them as a gift meant to help others, even if many people don't understand or believe in them. That's fascinating. Have you been able to use those abilities to help people? I try to, when I can. But I'm very careful about how and when I share information. I never want to scare anyone or make them feel like their free will has been taken away by knowing too much about their future. Mostly, I use intuitive knowledge to offer guidance or comfort to people. If I sense someone is struggling with a decision, I might offer a different perspective that helps them. Or if I know someone is about to go through a difficult time, I try to be there to support them through it. But I'm always very clear that I don't have all the answers. The future isn't set in stone. We all have free will and the ability to make choices that can change our path. I simply try to use what I've been given to spread more love and understanding in the world. That's a beautiful way to look at it. Going back to your NDE for a moment, you mentioned seeing scenes from human history as you traveled through the tunnel of darkness. Can you elaborate on what you saw? It was like watching snippets of a film reel, but all around me in every direction. I saw flashes of major historical events, things like Hitler giving speeches, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the 9/11 attacks. But I also saw smaller, more personal moments, a mother cradling her newborn baby, a soldier saying goodbye to his family before deploying, two elderly people holding hands on their 50th wedding anniversary. It was as if I was being shown the entirety of human experience, the triumphs and tragedies, the mundane and the extraordinary. I got the sense that all of it was interconnected somehow, that every moment and decision, no matter how small, ripples out to affect the whole. That's a profound insight into the interconnectedness of all things. Did you gain any other spiritual insights from your experience? So many. It really transformed my entire worldview and understanding of life, death, and what comes after. One of the biggest things I took away was a deep sense of the eternal nature of our souls. Our physical bodies are temporary vessels, but our true essence, our soul or consciousness or whatever you want to call it, that part of us is immortal. I also came to understand that this earthly life is just one small part of our soul's journey. We come here to learn and grow, but it's not the end goal. Our ultimate destination is to rejoin with God as source/the divine, whatever name you want to give to that all-encompassing love and oneness I experienced. Another major realization was about the nature of time. In that realm beyond physical reality, past, present and future all seem to exist simultaneously. It's hard for our human minds to grasp, but linear time as we understand it is an illusion of this physical dimension. Those are some incredibly deep spiritual concepts. How did this newfound understanding change how you live your life? It changed everything, really. Knowing that this life is temporary and that we all eventually return to that place of pure love and light, it takes away so much fear and anxiety about death. That's not to say I have a death wish or anything. I still very much want to fulfill my purpose here and complete my soul contract. But I no longer fear what comes after. I know my children are in a place of indescribable peace and joy, and that I'll be reunited with them when my time comes. It's also made me much more mindful of how I treat others and move through the world. Knowing that we're all eternal souls on our own journeys, all ultimately from the same source, it inspires so much more compassion and understanding. I try not to get caught up in petty disagreements or material concerns. I focus more on spreading love, being kind, and helping others whenever I can. Those are the things that truly matter in the grand scheme of things. That's a beautiful perspective. I'm curious, you mentioned that souls choose their life experiences before coming to Earth. Do you believe that applies to everyone, even those who suffer terribly or die young? That's a really challenging question, and one I've struggled with a lot myself. It's so hard for us to understand from our limited human perspective why anyone would choose to experience trauma or cut their life short. What I came to understand is that our souls have a much broader view than our human selves do. They choose experiences that will facilitate the greatest growth and learning, even if those experiences are painful at the moment. That doesn't mean that suffering is good or that we shouldn't try to alleviate it. I believe we absolutely should do everything in our power to reduce suffering and injustice in the world. But it helps me to remember that even in the darkest moments, there is a greater purpose at work. For instance, with my own children, their lives were cut tragically short, but the impact they had in their brief time here continues to ripple out. Their story has touched many lives and inspired changes to help protect other children from abuse. From a soul perspective, that may have been part of their purpose for this lifetime. But I want to be clear, this understanding doesn't take away the pain or grief of losing them. I still miss them terribly every day. It just helps me find some meaning in the tragedy and trust that there's a greater plan at work, even when I can't see or understand it. Thank you for sharing that perspective on such a difficult topic. You mentioned earlier that you were shown visions of the future during your NDE. Can you tell us more about some of the specific events or changes you saw? Of course. I want to preface this by saying that the future isn't set in stone. Our collective choices and actions can still influence the outcome. But here are some of the major events and changes I was shown. In 2024, just a couple of years from now, I saw the world banking system on the verge of collapse. To prevent total economic meltdown, governments and financial institutions will push for a complete overhaul of how money works. They'll phase out all physical currency and force everyone to switch to digital cryptocurrencies. This new financial system will give governments and banks unprecedented control over people's money. They'll be able to track every transaction and even cut off access to funds if someone is deemed problematic. Alongside this, I saw the United States implement a social credit system similar to what China has now. People will be assigned scores based on things like their education, criminal record, political affiliations, and online behavior. These scores will determine what opportunities and resources they have access to. However, this system doesn't last long in the US. In 2028, Donald Trump is re-elected as president. One of his first actions is to dismantle the social credit system and new currency structure, bringing back paper money for American citizens. This ushers in a period of relative stability and peace, both in America and globally. For about 3 decades, there are no major wars, and issues like famine and extreme poverty are largely eliminated. But in 2061, political divisions in the United States reached a breaking point. The country ends up splitting into 2 separate nations, the United Northern States and the United Southern States of America. Surprisingly, this split happens without a civil war. The 2 countries initially coexist peacefully as separate entities. However, this weakened state makes both countries vulnerable. In 2063, China launched a massive invasion of both the northern and southern United States. This forces them to reunite, along with Canada and Mexico, forming a new country called the United States of North America to fight off the Chinese invasion. This triggers a global conflict that lasts for 7 years. It's a devastating war that reshapes the world order. But when it finally ends in 2070, there's a worldwide declaration that no more wars will be fought. This peace holds at least until 2077, which is as far into the future as I was shown. Those are some very specific and dramatic predictions. Have you seen any signs of these events starting to unfold? Yes, I have. The global financial system is already showing signs of strain, and we're seeing more and more push towards digital currencies. The social credit system hasn't been officially implemented in the US yet, but we're seeing elements of it in how social media companies and some governments are starting to monitor and control people's online behavior. As for the political division leading to the country splitting, I think anyone paying attention can see how polarized America has become. The idea of the country literally dividing into 2 separate nations might seem far-fetched now, but given the trajectory we're on, I can see how we might reach that point in a few decades. Of course, I hope that by sharing these visions, we might be able to change course and avoid some of the more catastrophic outcomes. But I also believe that everything happens for a reason, and that even periods of great upheaval can lead to positive transformation in the long run. It's certainly a lot to think about. Shifting gears a bit, you mentioned that you remarried and had another child after your NDE. How has your experience affected your relationship with your new family? My experience has definitely shaped how I approach my relationships and how I parent my son. I cherish every moment with them, knowing how precious and fleeting our time together in this life can be. At the same time, it can be challenging. Knowing the exact year that my husband will die, that's a heavy burden to carry. I haven't told him about that part of my vision. I worry about how that knowledge might affect him or change how he lives his life. With my son, I'm very conscious of the fact that he chose me as his mother for this lifetime, just as my twins did. I try to honor that choice by being the best parent I can be, while also remembering that he has his own soul journey and purpose to fulfill. My NDE gave me a much broader perspective on life and death. I know that our connections to our loved ones extend far beyond this single lifetime. That brings me comfort, but it can also make it hard to relate to others who don't share that understanding. I can see how that would be both a blessing and a challenge. How have you coped with the trauma of your past experiences while moving forward with your new life? It hasn't been easy, I'll be honest. The grief of losing my children in such a traumatic way, that never fully goes away. There are still days when the pain feels as fresh as it did the day it happened. But my near-death experience gave me a perspective that has helped me cope. Knowing that my children are at peace, that their souls completed the journey they set out to experience, it doesn't take away the pain of missing them, but it does help me find meaning in the tragedy. I've also found that helping others has been a powerful way to heal. I volunteer with organizations that support victims of domestic violence and child abuse. Being able to use my experience to potentially save other lives or help other survivors heal, it gives purpose to my pain. Therapy has also been crucial in my healing journey. It's taken a lot of work to process not just the trauma of losing my children, but also the profound spiritual experience of my NDE. Finding a therapist who was open to discussing the spiritual aspects without judgment was really important. Ultimately, I've come to view life as a journey of continuous growth and learning. Every experience, even the most painful ones, offers opportunities for expansion of the soul. That doesn't mean the pain isn't real or valid, but it helps me frame it in a way that allows for healing and forward movement. Thank you for sharing that. It's clear that your experience has given you a unique perspective on life, death, and spirituality. How do you respond to skeptics who might doubt your story or the validity of NDEs in general? I completely understand the skepticism. If I hadn't experienced it myself, I'm not sure I would believe it either. It goes against so much of what we're taught to believe about the nature of reality. I don't try to convince anyone or prove the validity of my experience. I simply share my story and the insights I've gained from it. Whether someone believes me or not doesn't change the truth of what I experienced or the positive impact it's had on my life. That said, there is a growing body of scientific research into near-death experiences. Many of the elements I experienced, the tunnel of light, the life review, the sensation of leaving one's body, these are consistently reported by people from all walks of life, across cultures and belief systems. There are also cases where people have reported verifiable information they couldn't have known through normal means during their NDEs. For instance, some have accurately described what was happening in other parts of the hospital while they were clinically dead. But ultimately, I think NDEs point to something that goes beyond what our current scientific instruments can measure. They suggest that consciousness isn't produced by the brain, but rather that the brain acts more like a receiver for consciousness. For those who are skeptical, I would simply encourage them to keep an open mind. There's so much about the nature of reality and consciousness that we still don't understand. NDEs offer a glimpse into aspects of existence that our everyday waking consciousness doesn't usually have access to. That's a very balanced perspective. As we wrap up our conversation, what message or insight from your experience do you most want to share with others? The most important thing I learned from my NDE is that love is the fundamental fabric of the universe. Everything, every person, every event, every choice, is ultimately an expression of that all-encompassing love, even if we can't always see or understand it from our limited human perspective. I would encourage everyone to try to tap into that love in their daily lives. Treat others with kindness and compassion, knowing that we're all eternal souls on our own journeys. Don't get too caught up in material concerns or petty conflicts. Focus on what truly matters, loving others, growing as a person, and leaving the world a little better than you found it. Remember that this physical life is temporary, but the impact we have on others ripples out far beyond our time here. Every act of kindness, every moment of love shared, it all matters more than we can possibly understand from this side of the veil. And for those who are grieving or facing their own mortality, know that death is not the end. Our consciousness, our essential self, continues on. We are reunited with our loved ones and with that source of divine love. There's nothing to fear. Ultimately, I believe we're all here to learn, to grow, and to remember our true nature as eternal, love-filled beings. Everything we experience, the joys and the sorrows, is part of that journey of remembering who we really are. Thank you so much, Rosalie, for sharing your profound experience and insights with us. Your story is truly remarkable and gives much to reflect on regarding the nature of life, death, and what might lie beyond. Thank you for allowing me to share my story. I hope that it brings comfort, hope, and a broader perspective to those who hear it.